Today, we're jumping right into a fascinating paper, Evolution-Guided General Optimization via Low-Rank Learning. You might know it by its acronym EGGROLL. And this one, it's not just some minor tweak. It feels like it fundamentally solves a scaling problem that has really held back black box optimization for giant models.
Exactly. The core challenge is pretty straightforward. You have evolution strategies, or ES, which are incredibly powerful for optimizing things that are non-differentiable or have really noisy objectives, but they just fall apart when you try to apply them to modern billion parameter networks. The computational load of generating full rank noise for every single worker, it just becomes prohibitively expensive.
And that's the wall EGGROLL is designed to break through. It does this by generating its parameter perturbations using low rank matrices, the classic AB top dollar, where that internal rank $3 is just tiny compared to the actual matrix dimensions.
Right. And this one idea leads to four really critical breakthroughs. First, just pure efficiency. Your auxiliary storage and compute complexity, they drop from being proportional to dim and lower, just too much, plus and dollars. And second, speed. Raw speed. They saw a 100-fold increase in training throughput. They got it to the point where it's nearly as fast as pure batch inference.
Which is incredible. Third, the performance is actually competitive. EGGROLL delivers state-of-the-art results in reinforcement learning, and in some cases, outperforms comparable methods on LLM reasoning tasks. And then fourth, and this might be the coolest part, is the flexibility. It allows for stable pre-training of these really exotic, specialized architectures, things like recurrent language models that operate entirely on integer data types. It basically reclaims ES for hyperscale.
Okay, so let's unpack all of that. Maybe we should start with the basic appeal. For an ML engineer who lives in PyTorch, who's used to backpropagation for everything, why should they even get excited about evolution strategies in the first place?
I think it comes down to flexibility and robustness. The biggest chain holding back is, it needs to be differentiable. ES just throws that requirement right out the window. And that's critical when you're optimizing systems where the objective is discrete or noisy or comes from some sparse signal like, reward optimization from human feedback.
That ability to handle non-smooth functions is a huge conceptual jump. And what's more, we find that ES is often way more robust to the usual pitfalls of deep learning optimization. Because it's population-based, it naturally smooths out these really jagged, ill-conditioned landscapes. You get this built-in robustness against things like vanishing or exploding gradients.
Especially in very long sequential settings, right?
Exactly.
And I think the third big advantage, which is probably the key to EGGROLL's success, is the parallelization.
Oh, absolutely. The fitness evaluations for every single member of the population are completely independent. This maps almost perfectly onto modern cloud infrastructure that's built for inference. You could just spin up workers and get near linear speedups. Contrast that with backprop, where you're constantly communicating and aggregating these massive gradients. The communication overhead is just a killer at scale.
So we have this really powerful optimization tool, ES, that's great for parallelism, great for complex objectives. But like you said, it hits a wall with deep learning. Can you talk a bit more about how big that wall actually is?
The wall is, it's the cost of the noise. In deep learning, 99% of your parameters are in these huge weight matrices, more in times ES. A traditional ES algorithm needs to generate a full rank perturbation matrix, ES, the exact same size, for every single member of the population.
So if you're training, say, a 7 billion parameter model, and you want a decent population size for search, maybe 1,000, you suddenly need the storage and compute to handle what amounts to 1,000 copies of that entire model just for the noise perturbations.
Precisely. And that overhead just crushes your memory and makes the wall clock timescale horribly with the population size. It's why previous ES work was always stuck with small models or these tiny populations that were, they were basically just doing zero-order optimization, not true population-based search.
Okay, so this is where EGGROLL comes in with its really elegant solution. It tackles this problem with low-rank perturbations. Now, that immediately makes me think of methods like LoRa, which people use for gradient-based fine-tuning. How does EGGROLL apply that same idea here in the ES world?
It's a very similar concept, just applied to the noise generation. So instead of sampling that full mile times matrix metaveiler, EGGROLL samples two much smaller matrices. You have an LL that's many times RR, and a dollar that's a Schwatte times RN. And the key, of course, is that 3-hour, the rank, is tiny. It's orders of magnitude smaller than a dollar or not.
And the final perturbation, AGM, is just constructed as 1 frat 1 scored off. So what are the actual efficiency gains for someone listening? Like, what does that mean in practice?
The gains are spectacular. For auxiliary memory, The cost per layer drops from more dollars all the way down to 9m plus n. And then for the forward pass compute, where you're actually applying the noise, that complexity falls from more rm plus n. For a matrix where m and n are in the thousands and r is, I don't know, 10, that's a game-changing reduction.
And they have another little implementation trick that pushes the efficiency even further, right? The fact that they don't even need to store the noise.
Yes, that's crucial. AGRE uses a counter-based deterministic random number generator, so it can perfectly reconstruct the noise on demand for any worker, just from a seed and a counter. It means the perturbation matrices never even have to exist in memory, which is sort of the final nail in the coffin for that memory bottleneck.
Okay, but I have a question. If each individual perturbation, a UR for a single worker, is low rank and R is tiny, let's say it's 1 or 10, aren't we sacrificing the quality of the search? I mean, are we just sampling along these very narrow, restricted directions in the parameter space and maybe missing the best path?
That is the single most important question, and it gets to the critical distinction of EGGROLL. While the perturbation for one worker is low rank, you have to remember that the final update step is an aggregation. It's a weighted average across the entire population of Netherall workers.
Ah, so you're averaging different independently sampled rank R matrices.
Exactly. And because the whole system is designed for massive population sizes, the final overall parameter update matrix actually becomes full rank. The paper notes that in all their experiments, the rank of the update, which is min, AUR, was actually just the min. So the update is full rank. The efficiency is in the sampling, but the power of a full rank search is retained in the update.
That's a perfect way to put it. You optimize the sampling without restricting the update manifold. So the low rank part is just a computational shortcut. Okay, that makes sense. Let's get into the theoretical justification then. Why does this approximation work so well?
The theory here gives you a lot of confidence. They formally proved that these low-rank EGGROLL updates converge to the true full-rank Gaussian ES updates at an incredibly fast rate of O fraction.
Wait, O fraction? That's faster than I would expect. Isn't the typical rate from something like the central limit theorem usually fractat? How do they get past that square root limit?
It comes from a really nice property of the problem. There's an inherent symmetry in the formulation of Gaussian evolution strategies. And because of that symmetry, all the odd-order cumulants of the noise distribution, like the third-order terms, they just go to zero. They vanish. So the convergence rate is no longer limited by those second-order or scored terms. It's controlled by the next terms in line, which are the fourth-order cumulants.
And those decay at the faster rate. Wow, that is a powerful theoretical guarantee. It really justifies the risk they took with this approximation.
It absolutely does. And this theoretical result is perfectly mirrored in their empirical results. The paper shows the approximation is super accurate even for extremely small values of $2. For instance, just using a rank of $2 had almost a negligible performance drop compared to full rank ES.
Just think about that for a second. You're getting maybe a millionfold reduction in the complexity of generating noise for basically zero loss in optimization quality. That's wild.
Yep, and their plots of the marginal score density really drive this home. Once the rank hit about $200, the approximated density was almost perfectly converged to the true one. And by $205, it was visually indistinguishable. The evidence is just overwhelming.
Okay, let's translate this efficiency into real-world numbers. The normalized training speeds in the paper are probably the most direct evidence of just how scalable this is.
The throughput gains are just immense. They normalize the maximum speed of pure batch inference to 100. On that scale, EGGROLL hits a speed of 91. To put that in perspective, the standard full-rank OpenES method, it scored a 0.41. And even a highly optimized gradient method like PPO only got to 34.
A hundredfold increase in throughput over standard ES. That's exactly what they promised. So how did this translate to performance on actual tasks like reinforcement learning?
In the standard RO benchmarks, they tested it against OpenES and PPO on fairly small networks across 16 different environments, NavX, CraftX, Brax, that kind of thing. And the results were really clear. EGGROLL was competitive with OpenES on 7 of them and flat out outperformed it on another 7. So the bottom line is it matches or beats the baseline while being orders of magnitude faster.
All right, now for the really cutting-edge stuff, large language model reasoning. How did that speed and scale advantage turn into better performance on actual LLM tasks?
They focused on fine-tuning the RWKV7 recurrent language models. On the countdown arithmetic task, which is really demanding, EGGROLL hit a validation accuracy of 35%. This is way higher than the 23% from GRPO. And we should probably clarify, GRPO is a specialized gradient-based method used for these kinds of tasks. They were both run for the same amount of time on the same hardware.
That's a pretty substantial gap in performance. How did EGGROLL actually enable that? What was the mechanism?
It just leveraged its efficiency for massive parallelism. Because the memory overhead was so low, EGGROLL could run 124 parallel generations per GPU during the evaluation phase. GLPO, on the other hand, was stuck with just 32. That huge population size lets EGGROLL explore the parameter space so much more effectively, and it just finds better solutions faster. The same pattern held on the GSM-8K math reasoning task, too.
So the efficiency isn't just about saving compute costs, it's a direct lever for better optimization quality because it unlocks a much larger, more diverse search.
Exactly. It confirms that for these complex black box objectives, population scale isn't just a nice-to-have. It's a critical component for actually getting good results.
And this leads to what I think is one of the most exciting parts of the paper. Designing a totally new architecture specifically for this kind of optimization, the Evolved Generative GRU, or EGG. This really shows EGGROLL not just as an algorithm, but as a general optimization method for things that gradients just can't touch.
That's right. The EGG model was designed under 3 really severe constraints, all aimed at maxing out inference efficiency, and all using non-differentiable parts that only ES could handle.
Okay, let's break those down. What was the first one, the one about data types?
Constraint 1 was pure integer data types. This is a huge deal. All the weights were Indy8 and all the activations were kept in integer formats. The reason is simple. Indy8 matrix multiplication is the absolute fastest operation on modern hardware like H100s. So using pure integers means massive energy and compute savings at inference time.
Which is incredibly difficult to train with standard methods since integer ops aren't really differentiable.
Exactly. Constraint 2 was about sequence length. They used a min-GRU variant, which is a nonlinear recurrent neural network. This gets rid of backpropagation through time, which lets them train stably on basically unbounded sequence lengths.
And the third constraint is, to me, the most radical one. They removed standard activation functions. No real LU, no GLU, nothing. How does a network even compute without nonlinearities?
They relied completely on implicit nonlinearity. Specifically, the saturated addition that's just inherent to integer arithmetic. When you add 2 numbers and the result goes past the int8 boundary, it clips. That clipping is the nonlinearity. It's a non-differentiable operation, of course, but for a black box method like EGGROLL, it's a perfectly valid signal to optimize against.
That is just a fantastic demonstration of how general this is. It can train a huge model built entirely from parts that would completely break a gradient descent optimizer.
So what kind of scale did this enable for the EGG pre-training? It was completely unprecedented for ES. EGGROLL let them stably pre-train the EGG model with population sizes up to 260,144. That's 218 parallel workers. That is 2 full orders of magnitude larger than any previous ES work.
And the ablation studies proved that scale was necessary.
Absolutely. They tried running it with tiny populations like N2, which is basically 0th order optimization. And training was just completely unstable. It confirms that the key isn't just adding some noise, it's maximizing the number of unique perturbations. That massive scale that EGGROLL enables is functionally necessary for stability here.
So stepping back, the big takeaway is that EGGROLL effectively tears down the computational wall that was holding evolution strategies back. It makes black box optimization viable and even competitive for billion-parameter models.
For sure. It does it by cleverly decoupling the low-rank sampling from the full-rank update. And if you think about the broader picture of AI research, its ability to handle these non-differentiable parts, it really opens the door to training entirely new classes of systems that have been out of reach for gradient-based methods.
Which brings up the question of what comes next. What kind of future applications does a tool like this unlock?
Well, think about complex neurosymbolic systems. Architectures where a neural net has to interface directly with a symbolic module for memory or calculation or logic. The symbolic parts have hard, non-differentiable steps that just stop gradients cold.
But EGGROLL could just treat that whole composite system as one big black box.
Exactly. You could optimize the entire pipeline end-to-end, based only on the final output. This could also apply to training models that are aware of their own inference time constraints, like optimizing a model to run on a specific resource-constrained edge device. At the end of the day, EGGROLL makes black box optimization a serious contender for building these truly frontier architectures.